Hello and welcome to the third Newcomers tournament, Group C, Game 3. I'm your co-host, Philo Fanick, along with Blues. We have a game with Oh Jesus Bees, Mid-3 Matt, Rahi, and Bobson. What do you think about this map, Blues?
The thing that really sticks out to me right away, just iron starting double priced, steel starting half priced. There are a lot of things you can do with that. In particular, this combo tile area down south. There's maybe a scientific that you can start with iron in the west. Some strong carbon in the east.
There's some carbon in the east. There are nukes on the board. So at least 3 founding locations, and I think our players have identified that and are kind of waiting it out. We have a scavenger founding in the robot spot. In 3 met founding next to some iron, no aluminum. Well, I guess there's these low patches of aluminum immediately bumping up to HQ level 2. Rahi going for that scientific spot that you had mentioned. Although,
Interesting that all the players decided to cluster on this west side of the map. All the
well,
silicon is on the east side, and a lot of the good water is there. So this might be a bit difficult for these players.
The black market is online.
everybody hits level 2, HQ 2 at roughly the same time. Bobson is going for 2 elemental quarries in this game. That is an improvement over the last, although
It is unfortunate that he has what seems to be a missed found. At least this
probably
iron tile should not have been taken regardless.
right.
Ooh. In 3 mat going for this medium water tile, really getting in the way of Rahi here.
With the water starting these creeping up high, that seems like a good move. Kind of hurts that scientist. I like it.
Yeah, anytime you can get in the way of a scientist early, it's generally worth doing. One thing I might have liked to see out of Rahi is instead founding closer to the water. I think that would have resulted in significantly less shipping, something like 2 tiles away from the iron, instead of right now being 4 tiles away from this water.
Right. Rahi's also going into double low aluminum.
Yeah, I have to wonder about that. Taking 2 aluminum tiles I think makes sense, sort of. Not really, actually, with what Bobson's doing again. Maybe just go for this medium a little further.
A scavenger HQ has been upgraded.
Min 3 Matt jumping into a nice sizable lead, going up to HQ level 3 first, with Bobson following not too far behind, going a lot faster now that they actually have 5.25 carbon a second coming in.
This chemical move is something I have to wonder about. No in producing fuel, no carbon access for Min 3 mat. It feels like something that's not going to be too sustainable. It is a chem colony though, so that's something.
Right.
3 chem labs will overwhelm that though.
Sure, but right now.
A new claim is
Now, Bees here is taking advantage of this really low water price and just going straight into some farms without having that water. Bees does have a medium aluminum mine and is stockpiling some carbon for the future, and assuming they're thinking about moving into some chemicals due to that chemical colony. As the upgrade, if they want to take it, should be joining the rest at level 3 shortly.
The carbon tile is nice, but at the same time I do have to wonder about a tile that was only ever going to be a low by itself.
Rahi is switching out some of her water tiles into the electrolysis reactors. They do make more money than farms, but they do use a lot more power. than farms do, and power is slowly but steadily creeping ever higher.
At the same time, there is already chem production down, there are farms down, and there's this dust storm going on, so that's just the few factors that really, I think, push the decision towards reactors being right.
Min 3 Matt is going for double geotherms, which if they can keep those defended will be very, very nice with this power price going 250 and climbing. Bobson hit level 4 first, going into double solar panels. He had one at level 3, putting up a second one. Also going into these electronics factories, which to me seems like a mistake with silicon increasing 65 and higher and being on the absolute other side of the map.
Just a lot of things that interfere with this electronics production. I think out of a robot it maybe makes a bit more sense since they need those to upgrade. Instead, he's really not making much money, and he'll be knocking down the price of electronics for his robotic opponents.
Like last game, Bobson is also first into the patent lab. I'd like to see Superconductor come out first. That would be a great patent to pick up at the beginning. I'd also like to see Min 3 Matt try and go for Superconductor with this geotherm connected to their base.
Oh geez, its Bees could also use Superconductor quite nicely, though Bees is not really in a great position to get into that patent lab.
No.
I do have to wonder about this third wind turbine, the very weak one being built there. Could have been swung over to the other side a bit stronger. You lose a little bit of adjacency on steel, but that's not really costing you anything right now.
No. Especially with steel losing money at this point, but...
And the other thing about this wind, it was doing great work while Bees was, while there's a dust storm going on, but at this point it's very weak. It's hard to push through debt with it. And yeah, there was never a goon down, so these freezes are going to just be devastating.
Yeah, Min 3 Matt with the EMP on Bees, perhaps trying to make sure the fourth place player stays in the fourth place.
Also
Bobson,
just a nice move to knock down a lot of power production.
Bobson is immediately going into teleportation, which is something I think new players get fixated on a little bit too much.
Definitely a very powerful patent, but it's so expensive, it takes so long to research, that you're losing a lot of advantages in the short term.
Bobson also going for that early stock play again, although...
The patent lab is constructed.
Its scientist in D-Dead is definitely a nicer target than
the black market is open for business.
Cheesecake was last game. I think
Bob,
it was Cheesecake.
If other players decide to join in on this, it could work out to Bobson's favor. Rahi immediately EMPs Bobson just to make sure that Bobson doesn't have any income to buy her out, and Bobson with the cheeky chat right back at her.
Yeah. Bobson really just getting to this position off of carbon, I think. A lot of wind turbines going up, and carbon consumption with the chemicals. It's hard to see where else he's really getting money from. He has no access to water, no access to silicon, which is part of why I guess teleportation was very important for him.
Going into nanotechnology second, I'd still really like to see somebody go into Superconductor. Hopefully Min 3 Matt's going into Superconductor.
Superconductor is just such a nice, cheap, quick patent, and it can get so much done.
It will pay off with power going down a little bit. But if someone can pick up Superconductor in the not-too-distant future, they will A, deny their opponents paying off that debt, and B, will pay off some of their debt very nicely. Cold Fusion is a decent patent at this point in time, with power high, water low compared to power, but rising.
Yeah, I'd definitely be very concerned about relying on cold fusion. Everyone has very weak water at this point.
Power production is being targeted by all players. Bobson targeting Min 3 Mat's geotherm, Min 3 Mat blowing up one of B's many windmills.
Speaking of water
Right.
and power, Min 3 Mat claiming this high water tile completely across the map. That seems dangerous to me. There's never going to be access to teleportation. He already has this 3.75 water, which isn't great, but maybe something can get away with as a robot. I would maybe rather see something like a slant drilling. You can get maybe a third pump right near you, and that's much safer play, I believe.
Yes, there are two players going, well, two players with really long shipments. Min 3 Mat also has a high silicon quarry all the way in the bottom right-hand side of the map, in addition to that high water he's shipping, and then B's has a high elemental quarry right up in the top right-hand side of the map. So there's power is decreasing, but that's still a lot of shipping costs for both of those robots.
Yeah, the silicon tiles I think are a bit more understandable. They weren't really alternatives, but definitely painful still. In 3 Mat also going for this Pleasure Dome now. That's going to be more pressure on power. No perpetual motion picked up yet, though he did get Superconductor. The Pleasure Dome is going to be significantly weaker this game. 2 robots, only 1 scavenger, 1 scientist.
Mm-hmm.
But
Rahi has defended herself, is going on the patent lab, which with the off-worlds going at 35, 36k and counting is a great pickup.
yeah, having thinking machines and slant drilling secured.
Machines, but Min 3 Mat will beat Rahi to thinking machines, so Min 3 Mat will get the benefit from thinking machines, and for any newer players on the stream, thinking machines decreases the pain of sabotage from buildings right next to your HQ. So all these buildings here will be frozen for half the time, will cost half the amount of resources to repair, which is great for protecting off-worlds with.
Right, and we see that there are the dynamites available, and off-world prices are quite high. So that's definitely going to be a big boon for Min 3 Mat here.
Screw with us, and we'll screw with you.
We have a lot more early black markets going on compared to our last game, which I like. New players often do not use the black market enough. And unfortunately, like last game, we see Bobson with the stock purchase throwing away that early lead that they had. The only HQ in level 4, everyone else has gone into level 5.
Yeah, and at this point, just all the production's very weak. Never moved to HQ5 to take advantage of that teleportation. That he's just stuck in a lot of electronics, which are barely doing anything.
Right.
It's not a good position.
If he sells out of that stock, upgrades to HQ5, gets some silicon with that teleportation, those electronics won't be half bad, but at this point...
The black market is open for business.
Yeah, and B is also another player kind of struggling after taking a lot of money in with that power play. Just sticking in power maybe a bit too long, having a lot of trouble with the steel price. All this win could easily become more steel. Go all the way up at 264.
Bees is also in the 3 farms that are barely making any money.
Reactors and chemicals not doing any better.
Right.
The optimization center is online. Let the planned obsolescence
One
begin.
steel mill, which is making 215 a second. Bees really needs to transition some of these water-based production into steel, with steel so high.
And steel is so high in part because of Min 3 Mat's Offworld, which is not actually taking advantage of thinking machines. Either that's a mistake, not fully understanding thinking machines only affects tiles directly adjacent to your base, or that was just really trying to take advantage of the hologram that was already there, which does not seem the right trade-off with holograms so cheap.
Now, Min 3 Matt did get really lucky
Black
in the
market
fact
is
that
online.
Bees is the only one with a spy, and the Min 3 Matt's off-world is just out
A
of
new
range
claim is
of
available for
Bees'
auction.
spy.
Still has his cooldown available. Could buy a goon squad. Would be prudent with steel so high and dynamite so cheap.
Now, we haven't talked much about Rahi this game, since she's been in debt, a little bit behind some, they say, Min 3 Matt. But if she could pay off her debt, she doesn't seem to be in a terrible
Sold.
position.
Right, slant drilling doing a lot for her with this silicon and I guess this aluminum being changed into water-based production.
Methods continue to improve.
It is definitely a concern that she has so much of her stock bought up and she is in quite so much debt. It's difficult to find a way for her to catch up.
The only way she could catch up is if everybody else is buying into
The scavenger
Bobson right
HQ
now.
has
If
been
she can
upgraded.
somehow figure out a way to pull out some money and bio Bobson or get a majority of her stock back from the
Off-road
Bobson
shipment
purchase.
launched.
I think the more
You'll get
important
all
thing
the
maybe
money.
at this point is for everyone to really be throwing black market at Min 3 Matt. Otherwise he's just going to run away with things
Optimization
before
routine successful.
anyone has a chance to really catch up.
Right, there was a lot of black market being thrown around earlier, but it has sort of uttered out a little bit.
Min 3 Matt
After we-
going for adjacent offworlds now. Never something you really
The
like to
black
see with
market is
something like an
open for
EMP
business.
available. And even more so, having this suspicious building going up right now maybe invites the spy, which will expose your other offworld as well.
Right. Min
does-
3 Matt.
Does at least take advantage of the thinking machines.
Min 3 Matt did blow up Rahi's hacker ray, perhaps mistakenly thinking that it was a... Nope, he has a spy there. They have a spy on it, so they knew it was
Launch
hacker ray.
affirmative.
I guess he just
Water
didn't like
power.
that glass hack. Doesn't really have glass production, though he could easily get into it with that silicon secured.
These had inexplicably moved out of their steel production into all power, but is now making the correct choice and going back into more steel production, as that is really the... So I guess their food tiles have started making the money again. Not a
I
lot of
mean,
money.
not really,
The
because he
engineers have
has this
advanced on production.
500 food stored up. This is probably
Oh,
all
it's
losing money.
artificial. Yes, one of those things that you need to realize when you're in a market and other players are also in that market, both Rahi
We have
and
a
Min
hard-to-come
3
by
Matt.
land claim
Keeping a
available
huge
to the
stockpile
highest
of
bidder.
that resource hurts you and helps them.
Indeed.
So all this stockpile of 600 food is doing...
And maybe you can say the same thing about the carbon price with Bobson having all of this carbon production.
Congratulations.
No real reason for these to be hoarding. Okay, that's how it just happened.
Right, so now the real price of food is there, and Bees is not making any money on the food.
Really needs to transition out of those. Probably
He also
into
does
glass.
not appear to have auto off turned on.
There are a lot of players who dislike auto off. I do think it is invaluable, especially for newer players or less experienced ones.
Correct. I personally play with auto off myself. It's easier to turn off auto off individually when you don't want it to work than it is to constantly monitor. That's at least what I find. I know Black Magic dislikes auto off.
Right, I think it's just very nice to have something to prevent you from making these sorts
The
of
black
mistakes,
market is online.
because they will inevitably happen. Meanwhile, we
Bobson
see Min 3
Did
Matt.
get up to level 5, has 5 claims that they are not using. Using 4 silicon a second. Silicon has gone down in price a little bit, but it's still pretty high. So their glass is not making nearly as much money as it could be if we used
Right, and he still has that teleportation that he's not really
Teleportation.
taking great advantage of.
Carbon continues to increase, although I think a large part of that was Bobson just building this off-world. Bobson did start the construction of the off-world before hologramming it, so it is possible some other players viewed that if they were being attentive. We will find out. All our players have off-worlds right now. Min3Met is definitely in the best position with 2 off-worlds, although we commented about their relative position, but no one has seemed to spot them.
2 off-worlds, half the stock bought into Bees, who has his own off-world. It is not a great situation for anyone else. And 3Matt has also spotted Bobson's off-world with the spy. Something to point out about what Bobson has been doing this game, just producing a lot of steel for a long time. As a player who does not use steel, there was a point where it made sense. Iron was at maybe $1, steel's at 260. So there's a lot of money to be made in that market. But by sticking in it for so long, you're really, well, A, you're not making money, you're losing money right now, but B,
80 a second on it.
you're making this off-world so cheap for your opponents.
Finally, some black market is being thrown at Min3Met. However, it is in the wrong position for the off-worlds and probably too late.
Indeed. Already at 98% of the buy. And Rahi getting attacked so early just really probably derailed things for her. Making good effort
Right.
at coming back into things, but there's just no way of catching up.
No, unfortunately, Bobson's misplay there really hurt her. Both of her off-worlds are spied out by Min3Met, but Min3Met not doing anything about that just yet.
Look at all the money.
Min3Med
Our methods
picking up
continue to
1
improve.
stock in Rahi
The black
instead of
market
finishing
is
the
open
buy
for
quicker
business.
feels like a bit of a mistake to me. You definitely want to get that sub income rolling in as quickly as possible.
Optimization center is ready. Time to start improving everything.
A small mistake, since at this point, Rahi was the only one with near enough money to make that purchase, and a good chunk of that money is in this second off-world which is being constructed.
And now another chunk of money is in this crater being rebuilt.
Correct. So Rahi got beat by Min3Met 2 thinking machines, so
Optimization routine
her
successful.
off-worlds will cost full price to rebuild, which is
The
half
engineers
of the
have
normal
advanced
cost, so
into
she's paying
affirmative. What a payout.
52k per rebuild, versus if someone blows up Min3Met's off-worlds, it will only cost them, that was at 20 something. I can't do math. 22.5k. EMP's landing on Rahi. Perhaps, Min3Met by Rahi. Perhaps Rahi has realized where Min3Met's
Our
off-worlds
methods
are.
continue to
Perhaps
improve.
not.
Off-world
though-
market is ascending.
Even though Min3Met
Our
does
fortune
have
awaits.
a thinking machines, blowing up the off-world is not covered by thinking machines would be a great idea.
Optimization routine
Blowing up
successful.
the other off-world would still be a decent idea because it would deny that income, which at 51 per launch is quite sizable.
Indeed. And at this point, Min3Met
Has the game.
The black market is online.
So we can Min3Met, except for the thinking machines double off-world placement, seem to play a pretty good straightforward game, I'd like to say.
I think there were small
The
things we
off-world market is
would
finished
take
and
issue
awaiting
with.
orders.
This water play that I didn't like ended up kind of paying off. No one else really committed to all that much water, so having all that water was great. The superconductor perpetual motion kind of helped prevent power from going out of control with all that shipping. And it just worked out nicely.
Rahi, unfortunately, had that debt spiral she was never able to recover from, had that awkward purchase in from Bobson that also didn't help.
Yeah, I think without having to deal with that purchase, maybe the recovery from the debt goes a bit better. But that amount of pressure at that point is just nearly impossible to come back from sometimes.
Bees really needed to have auto off on and stuck into power way longer than power should have been.
Yeah, just need a lot more steel production. Hobson
And
was
then,
mostly just committing to strange types of production. Maybe this was a misfound, and also just pouring all that much money into Rahi while just never having any way to finish the buy.
right, Bobson was in a really good place the first two HQ4, if I recall correctly, which is where you want to be as a scavenger, especially when you're facing two other fast upgraders and robots, and just sort of threw away that lead by making that purchase into Rahi without the cash income to back it up.
Right. Despite the early lead, you might have had concerns about Bobson just because this found position is not very good. But he did pick up that teleportation. There were definitely opportunities for Bobson to expand into the resources he would have needed and made himself more of a factor late game instead of just really getting in the way.
The charts and graphs sort of show the game right there. Min 3 Matt with 875k from the off-worlds. Bobson the next closest at 245k, which is a little bit surprising because I thought B's off-world came up first, although maybe it got hit by the black market more often.
He had expressed some skepticism earlier about Min 3 Matt's Pleasure Dome. Ended up working out quite nicely for him, 195k, 312 per second with that virtual reality. I guess anytime you can get a virtual reality Pleasure Dome down and be uncontested, it is going to do good work for you.
Right, and it helped that the colony did grow a lot into the module habitats, which increases the value of the Pleasure Dome. Let's see. In theory, Met did make good use of that optimization center, getting about at least one optimization in on pretty much every production resource. Leading layer 13, Rahi 9, Bs with 5.
He's maybe overcommitting to this power and food, really locking him into that production maybe and making things a little more difficult.
Right.
All the steel upgrades, on the other hand, were definitely a big part of that game.
One thing I'd like to point out before we call it a game is often in 4-player FFAs, and I think to a certain extent in 1v1s, correct me if I'm wrong, but power is kind of cyclical. It'll bounce up, then people will get into it. It'll leave power, and then it will come back up again. So power right now is ending at 154, which is rather high.
As long as people aren't all just committed to geotherms, there's definitely going to be that bouncing around.
So especially when you're a robotic player, that is something to keep in the back of your mind, especially if you're shipping or you have lots of buildings that are using lots of power, like a bunch of steel mills or a bunch of electrolysis reactors. If you are hovering in that, B or C debt range and you don't anticipate the power spike, that could really hurt you if you're not paying attention.
One thing you can say about this game is that the power was a bit more of a gradual rise. It wasn't really a major spike quite so much. Although I guess it
No.
did go from $1 to $1.50 in about a sol.
That's in part because there was a lot of people who were over into too much power, and in part because there were 4 geothermal plants on the map, so that gave it a nice sort of cushion to keep it from
Yeah, I think
firing
in
super quickly.
B's or Bobson's position especially, that's the sort of time you really want to look for a patent that helps you deal with power. B's did pick up cold fusion off that auction, which maybe didn't help so much since water was a problem and he was spending so much water on food production. But it's when you're relying on wind or solar, you're going to want to be transitioning in and out a fair amount, and having those pads around can really help smooth things over.
Right. All right. I think that's it for this game. Let's get into the next one.